Welcome to the Liberty Myself Emancipation Media Club. Today's reading is
The Human Machine by Arnold Bennett.
This is part of our twice-daily content heartbeat designed to help build information autonomy in our algorithm-dominated world. Listen, reflect, and engage however works for you. Without further ado, let's jump in. Stay free.
The Human Machine by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 4. The First Practical Step. The brain is a highly quaint organism. Let me say at once, lest I should be cannonaded by physiologists, psychologists, or metaphysicians, that by the brawn I mean the faculty which reasons and which gives orders to the muscles. I mean exactly what the plain man means by the brain. The brain is the diplomatist which arranges relations between our instinctive self and the universe, and it fulfills its mission when it provides for the maximum of freedom to the instincts with the minimum of friction. It argues with the instincts. It takes them on one side and points out the unwisdom of certain performances. It catches them by the coat-tails when they are about to make fools of themselves. Don't drink all that iced champagne at a draught, it says to one instinct, we may die of it. Don't catch that rude fellow one in the eye, it says to another instinct, he is more powerful than us. It is, in fact, a majestic spectacle of common sense. And yet it has the most extraordinary lapses. It is just like that man, we all know him and consult him, who is a continual fount of excellent, sagacious advice on everything, but who somehow cannot bring his sagacity to bear on his own personal career. In the matter of its own special activities, the brain is usually undisciplined and unreliable. We never know what it will do next. We give it some work to do, say, as we are walking along the street to the office. Perhaps it has to devise some scheme for making 150 pounds suffice for 200 pounds. Or perhaps it has to plan out the heads of a very important letter. We meet a pretty woman, and away that undisciplined, sagacious brain runs after her, dropping the scheme or the draft letter, and amusing itself with aspirations or regrets for half an hour, sometimes a day. The serious part of our instinctive self feebly remonstrates, but without effect. Or it may be that we have suffered a great disappointment, which is definite and hopeless. Will the brain, like a sensible creature, leave that disappointment alone, and instead of living in the past live in the present or the future? Not it, though it knows perfectly well that it is wasting its time and casting a very painful and utterly unnecessary gloom over itself and us. It can so little control its unhealthy morbid appetite that no expostulations will induce it to behave rationally. Or perhaps, after a confabulation with the soul, it has been decided that when next a certain harmful instinct comes into play, the brain shall firmly interfere. Yes, says the brain, I really will watch that. But when the moment arrives, is the brain on the spot? The brain has probably forgotten the affair entirely, or remembered it too late, or sighs, as the victorious instinct knocks it on the head, well, next time. All this, and much more that every reader can supply from his own exciting souvenirs, is absurd and ridiculous on the part of the brain. It is a conclusive proof that the brain is out of condition, idle as a nigger, capricious as an actor-manager, and eaten to the core with loose habits. Therefore the brain must be put into training. It is the most important part of the human machine by which the soul expresses and develops itself, and it must learn good habits. And primarily it must be taught obedience. Obedience can only be taught by imposing one's will, by the sheer force of volition. And the brain must be mastered by willpower. The beginning of wise living lies in the control of the brain by the will, so that the brain may act according to the precepts which the brain itself gives. With an obedient, disciplined brain, a man may live always right up to the standard of his best moments. To teach a child obedience, you tell it to do something, and you see that that something is done. The same with the brain. Here is the foundation of an efficient life and the antidote for the tendency to make a fool of oneself. It is marvelously simple. Say to your brain, from 9 o'clock to 9:30 this morning you must dwell without ceasing on a particular topic which I will give you. Now, it doesn't matter what this topic is. The point is to control and invigorate the brain by exercise. But you may just as well give it a useful topic to think over as a futile one. You might give it this: my brain is my servant. I am not the plaything of my brain. Let it concentrate on these statements for 30 minutes. What? You cry. Is this the way to an efficient life? Why, there's nothing in it. Simple as it may appear, this is the way, and it is the only way. As for there being nothing in it, try it. I guarantee that you will fail to keep your brain concentrated on the given idea for 30 seconds, let alone 30 minutes. You will find your brain conducting itself in a manner which would be comic were it not tragic. Your first experiments will result in disheartening failure, for to exact from the brain, at will and by will, concentration on a given idea for even so short a period as half an hour is an exceedingly difficult feat, and a fatiguing. It needs perseverance. It needs a terrible obstinacy on the part of the will. That brain of yours will be hopping about all over the place, and every time it hops you must bring it back by force to its original position. You must absolutely compel it to ignore every idea except the one which you have selected for its attention. You cannot hope to triumph all at once. But you can hope to triumph. There is no royal road to the control of the brain. There is no patent dodge about it, and no complicated function which a plain person may not comprehend. It is simply a question of, I will, and I will. Italics here are indispensable. Let me resume. Efficient living, living up to one's best standard, getting the last ounce of power out of the machine with the minimum of friction. These things depend on the disciplined and vigorous condition of the brain. The brain can be disciplined by learning the habit of obedience. And it can learn the habit of obedience by the practice of concentration. Disciplinary concentration, though nothing could have the air of being simpler, is the basis of the whole structure. This fact must be grasped imaginatively, it must be seen and felt. The more regularly concentration is practiced, the more firmly will the imagination grasp the effects of it, both direct and indirect. After but a few days of honest trying in the exercise which I have indicated, you will perceive its influence. You will grow accustomed to the idea, at first strange in its novelty, of the brain being external to the supreme force which is you, and in subjection to that force. You will, as a not very distant possibility, see yourself in possession of the power to switch your brain on and off in a particular subject as you switch electricity on and off in a particular room. The brain will get used to the straight paths of obedience. And, a remarkable phenomenon, it will, by the mere practice of obedience, become less forgetful and more effective. It will not so frequently give way to an instinct that takes it by surprise. In a word, it will have received a general tonic. With a brain that is improving every day you can set about the perfecting of the machine in a scientific manner. Chapter 5. Habit forming by concentration. As soon as the will has got the upper hand of the brain, as soon as it can say to the brain, with a fair certainty of being obeyed, do this. Think along these lines and continue to do so without wandering until I give you leave to stop, then is the time arrived when the perfecting of the human machine may be undertaken in a large and comprehensive spirit. As a city council undertakes the purification and reconstruction of a city, the tremendous possibilities of an obedient brain will be perceived immediately we begin to reflect upon what we mean by our character. Now, a person's character is, and can be, nothing else but the total result of his habits of thought. A person is benevolent because he habitually thinks benevolently. A person is idle because his thoughts dwell habitually on the instant pleasures of idleness. It is true that everybody is born with certain predispositions, and that these predispositions influence very strongly the early formation of habits of thought. But the fact remains that the character is built by long-continued habits of thought. If the mature edifice of character usually shows in an exaggerated form the peculiarities of the original predisposition, this merely indicates a probability that the slow erection of the edifice has proceeded at haphazard, and that reason has not presided over it. A child may be born with a tendency to bent shoulders. If nothing is done, if on the contrary he becomes a clerk and abhors gymnastics, his shoulders will develop an excessive roundness, entirely through habit. Whereas, if his will, guided by his reason, had compelled the formation of a corrective physical habit, his shoulders might have been, if not quite straight, nearly so. Thus a physical habit. The same with a mental habit. The more closely we examine the development of original predispositions, the more clearly we shall see that this development is not inevitable. Is not a process which works itself out independently according to mysterious, ruthless laws which we cannot understand. For instance, the effect of an original predisposition may be destroyed by an accidental shock. A young man with an inherited tendency to alcohol may develop into a stern teetotaler through the shock caused by seeing his drunken father strike his mother, whereas, if his father had chanced to be affectionate in drink, the son might have ended in the gutter. No ruthless law here. It is notorious. Also, that natures are sometimes completely changed in their development by chance momentary contact with natures stronger than themselves. From that day I resolved, etc. You know the phrase. Often the resolve is not kept, but often it is kept. A spark has inflamed the will. The burning will has tyrannized over the brain. New habits have been formed. And the result looks just like a miracle. Now, if these great transformations can be brought about by accident, cannot similar transformations be brought about by a reasonable design? At any rate, if one starts to bring them about, one starts with the assurance that transformations are not impossible. Since they have occurred, one starts also in the full knowledge of the influence of habit on life. Take any one of your own habits, mental or physical. You will be able to recall the time when that habit did not exist, or if it did exist, it was scarcely perceptible. And you will discover that nearly all your habits have been formed unconsciously, by daily repetitions which bore no relation to a general plan, and which you practiced not noticing. You will be compelled to admit that your character, as it is today, is a structure that has been built almost without the aid of an architect, higgledy-piggledy, anyhow. But occasionally the architect did step in and design something. Here and there among your habits you will find one that you consciously and of deliberate purpose initiated and persevered with, doubtless owing to some happy influence. What is the difference between that conscious habit and the unconscious habits? None whatever as regards its effect on the sum of your character. It may be the strongest of all your habits. The only quality that differentiates it from the others is that it has a definite object, most likely a good object, and that it wholly or partially fulfills that object. There is not a man who reads these lines but has, in this detail or that, proved in himself that the will, forcing the brain to repeat the same action again and again, can modify the shape of his character as a sculptor modifies the shape of damp clay. But if a grown man's character is developing from day to day, as it is, if 9/10 of the development is due to unconscious action and 1/10 to conscious action, and if the 1/10 conscious is the most satisfactory part of the total result, why, in the name of common sense, henceforward, should not 9/10, instead of 1/10, be due to conscious action? What is there to prevent this agreeable consummation? There is nothing whatever to prevent it, except insubordination on the part of the brain. And insubordination of the brain can be cured. As I have previously shown, when I see men unhappy and inefficient in the craft of living, from sheer, crass inattention to their own development, when I see misshapen men building up businesses and empires, and never stopping to build up themselves, when I see dreary men expending precisely the same energy on teaching a dog to walk on its hind legs as would brighten the whole color of their own lives, I feel as if I wanted to give up the ghost, so ridiculous, so fatuous does the spectacle seem. But, of course, I do not give up the ghost. The paroxysm passes. Only I really must cry out, can't you see what you're missing? Can't you see that you're missing the most interesting thing on earth, far more interesting than businesses, empires, and dogs? Doesn't it strike you how clumsy and short-sighted you are, working always with an inferior machine when you might have a smooth gliding perfection? Doesn't it strike you how badly you are treating yourself? Listen, you confirmed grumbler. You who make the evening meal hideous with complaints against destiny, for it is you I will single out. Are you aware what people are saying about you behind your back? They are saying that you render yourself and your family miserable by the habit which has grown on you of always grumbling. Surely it isn't as bad as that, you protest. Yes, it is just as bad as that. You say, the fact is, I know it's absurd to grumble. But I'm like that. I've tried to stop it, and I can't. How have you tried to stop it? Well, I've made up my mind several times to fight against it, but I never succeed. This is strictly between ourselves. I don't usually admit that I'm a grumbler. Considering that you grumble for about an hour and a half every day of your life, it was sanguine, my dear sir, to expect to cure such a habit by means of a solitary intention, formed at intervals in the brain and then forgotten. No, you must do more than that. If you will daily fix your brain firmly for half an hour on the truth, you know it to be a truth, that grumbling is absurd and futile. Your brain will henceforward begin to form a habit in that direction. It will begin to be molded to the idea that grumbling is absurd and futile. In odd moments when it isn't thinking of anything in particular, it will suddenly remember that grumbling is absurd and futile. When you sit down to the meal and open your mouth to say, I can't think what my ass of a partner means by, it will remember that grumbling is absurd and futile, and will alter the arrangement of your throat. teeth, and tongue, so that you will say, "What fine weather we're having." In brief, it will remember involuntarily by a new habit. All who look into their experience will admit that the failure to replace old habits by new ones is due to the fact that at the critical moment the brain does not remember, it simply forgets. The practice of concentration will cure that. All depends on regular concentration. This grumbling is an instance, though chosen not quite at hazard. Chapter 6. Lord over the Noddle. Having proved by personal experiment the truth of the first of the two great principles which concern the human machine, namely, that the brain is a servant, not a master, and can be controlled, we may now come to the second. The second is more fundamental than the first, but it can be of no use until the first is understood and put into practice. The human machine is an apparatus of brain and muscle for enabling the ego to develop freely in the universe by which it is surrounded, without friction. Its function is to convert the facts of the universe to the best advantage of the ego. The facts of the universe are the material with which it is its business to deal, not the facts of an ideal universe, but the facts of this universe. Hence, when friction occurs, when the facts of the universe cease to be of advantage to the ego, the fault is in the machine. It is not the solar system that has gone wrong, but the human machine. Second great principle, therefore, in case of friction, the machine is always at fault. You can control nothing but your own mind. Even your 2-year-old babe may defy you by the instinctive force of its personality. But your own mind you can control. Your own mind is a sacred enclosure into which nothing harmful can enter except by your permission. Your own mind has the power to transmute every external phenomenon to its own purposes. If happiness arises from cheerfulness, kindliness, and rectitude, and who will deny it, what possible combination of circumstances is going to make you unhappy so long as the machine remains in order? If self-development consists in the utilization of one's environment, not utilization of somebody else's environment, how can your environment prevent you from developing? You would look rather foolish without it, anyway. In that noddle of yours is everything necessary for development, for the maintaining of dignity, for the achieving of happiness, and you are absolute lord over the noddle, will you but exercise the powers of lordship. Why worry about the contents of somebody else's noddle, in which you can be nothing but an intruder, when you may arrive at a better result, with absolute certainty, by confining your activities to your own? Look within. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Oh, yes, you protest. All that's old. Epictetus said that. Marcus Aurelius said that. Christ said that. They did. I admit it readily. But if you were ruffled this morning because your motor omnibus broke down, and you had to take a cab, then so far as you are concerned these great teachers lived in vain. You, calling yourself a reasonable man, are going about dependent for your happiness, dignity, and growth, upon 1,000 things over which you have no control. And the most exquisitely organized machine for ensuring happiness, dignity, and growth is rusting away inside you. And all because you have a sort of notion that a saying said 2,000 years ago cannot be practical. You remark sagely to your child, "No, my child, you cannot have that moon, and you will accomplish nothing by crying for it. Now, here is this beautiful box of bricks, by means of which you may amuse yourself while learning many wonderful matters and improving your mind. You must try to be content with what you have, and to make the best of it. If you had the moon you wouldn't be any happier. Then you lie awake half the night repining because the last post has brought a letter to the effect that the board cannot entertain your application for, etc. You say the two cases are not alike. They are not. Your child has never heard of Epictetus. On the other hand, justice is the moon. At your age you surely know that. But the directors ought to have granted my application. You insist. Exactly. I agree. But we are not in a universe of oughts. You have a special apparatus within you for dealing with a universe where oughts are flagrantly disregarded. And you are not using it. You are lying awake, keeping your wife awake, injuring your health, injuring hers, losing your dignity and your cheerfulness. Why? Because you think that these antics and performances will influence the board? Because you think that they will put you into a better condition for dealing with your environment tomorrow? Not a bit. Simply because the machine is at fault. In certain cases we do make use of our machines, as well as their sad condition of neglect will allow, but in other cases we behave in an extraordinarily irrational manner. Thus if we sally out and get caught in a heavy shower we do not, unless very far gone in foolishness, sit down and curse the weather. We put up our umbrella, if we have one, and if not we hurry home. We may grumble, but it is not serious grumbling. We accept the shower as a fact of the universe and control ourselves. Thus also, if by a sudden catastrophe we lose somebody who is important to us, we grieve, but we control ourselves, recognizing one of those hazards of destiny from which not even millionaires are exempt. And the result on our ego is usually to improve it in essential respects. But there are other strokes of destiny, other facts of the universe, against which we protest as a child protests when deprived of the moon. Take the case of an individual with an imperfect idea of honesty. Now, that individual is the consequence of his father and mother and his environment, and his father and mother of theirs, and so backwards to the single-celled protoplasm. That individual is a result of the cosmic order, the inevitable product of cause and effect. We know that. We must admit that he is just as much a fact of the universe as a shower of rain or a storm at sea that swallows a ship. We freely grant in the abstract that there must be, at the present stage of evolution, a certain number of persons with unfair minds. We are quite ready to contemplate such an individual with philosophy, until it happens that, in the course of the progress of the solar system, he runs up against ourselves. Then listen to the outcry. Listen to the continual explosions of a righteous man aggrieved. The individual may be our clerk, cashier, son, father, brother, partner, wife, employer. We are ill-used. We are being treated unfairly. We kick, we scream. We nourish the inward sense of grievance that eats the core out of content. We sit down in the rain. We decline to think of umbrellas or to run to shelter. We care not that that individual is a fact which the universe has been slowly manufacturing for millions of years. Our attitude implies that we want eternity to roll back and begin again, in such wise that we at any rate shall not be disturbed. Though we have a machine for the transmutation of facts into food for our growth, we do not dream of using it. But, we say, he is doing us harm. Where? In our minds. He has robbed us of our peace, our comfort, our happiness, our good temper. Even if he has, we might just as well inveigh against a shower. But has he? What was our brain doing while this naughty person stepped in and robbed us of the only possessions worth having? No, it is not that he has done us harm. The one cheerful item in a universe of stony facts is that no one can harm anybody except himself. It is merely that we have been silly, precisely as silly as if we had taken a seat in the rain with a folded umbrella by our side. The machine is at fault. I fancy we are now obtaining glimpses of what that phrase really means. How do the machines affect the way people live and connect with each other? Do you think this is a good or bad thing?
This has been an EMC reading from Liberty Myself. To learn more about our project to create decentralized media alternatives, visit libertymyself.com. By creating Liberty Myself, we create liberty for all.